I still remember the exact date when my life split into two parts, the before and the after. It was March 3rd, 2018, a quiet Saturday morning in Charlotte, North Carolina. The sun had barely risen. The smell of freshly brewed coffee was filling our kitchen, and I was sitting at the dining table with our two boys, Ethan and Liam, watching cartoons on TV while Melissa, my wife back then, was humming to herself as she flipped pancakes on the stove. Back then, my life looked perfect from the outside. I had a stable job in logistics, I traveled occasionally, but nothing too crazy, and we had just moved into our first real house. A cozy three-bedroom in a quiet suburban neighborhood where kids rode bikes and neighbors waved from their driveways. I was 33 years old, married to the love of my life, raising two healthy boys, and I genuinely thought I had it all. I wasn't just in love with Melissa, I adored her. I was that nice guy husband everyone talks about, the kind who never forgot anniversaries, who brought home flowers on random Tuesdays, who stayed up late helping with school projects, who believed in talking through problems instead of fighting. I used to write her little poems and leave sticky notes on the fridge, saying things like, "Can't wait to grow old with you." She'd laugh, roll her eyes, and kiss me on the cheek, and I swear, in those moments I thought we were untouchable. Looking back now, I cringe at how blind I was. Because while I was busy writing poems and folding laundry, Melissa was busy falling for someone else. It didn't happen overnight, at least that's what I tell myself when I try to make sense of it. She started a new job at a marketing agency downtown in 2017.
That's when she met Eric, and that's when everything slowly, silently began to unravel. I didn't know who he was at first. I just knew that suddenly, Melissa was staying late at the office more often, dressing a little differently, texting at odd hours, and laughing at jokes I wasn't in on. I'd ask her about it, and she'd wave me off with a casual, "Work's been crazy, babe, don't overthink it." So I didn't. Because I trusted her. Because for 7 years I had given her every ounce of my loyalty without a second thought. Because she was my person. But then little cracks started showing. Friends we used to hang out with, couples we had barbecues with on summer weekends, started acting weird around me, like they knew something I didn't, make jokes about Melissa being married to her job, and people would exchange awkward glances. At first I brushed it off, but deep down something started gnawing at me. Then one night, it hit me like a freight train. It was October. Melissa had gone out for drinks with coworkers, and I was home alone scrolling through Facebook while the boys were asleep. That's when I stumbled on a picture, Melissa at a rooftop bar downtown, holding a glass of wine, her head tilted back in laughter, and standing way too close beside her was a man I'd never seen before. His hand was resting casually on her lower back. That man was Eric. I didn't know it yet, but he was about to destroy my marriage, and the man I used to be. I confronted Melissa the next morning, but she denied everything, said I was paranoid, insecure, overreacting. And here's the messed up part, our friends backed her up. People I trusted, people I thought were our people, told me I was crazy, that Melissa would never do something like that. I started doubting my own instincts, wondering if maybe I really was the problem. For months, I lived in that hell, questioning myself, trying harder, being even more attentive, thinking if I just loved her better, she'd love me back the way she used to. Meanwhile, she was sneaking around with Eric behind my back. When the truth finally came out, it wasn't because she confessed. No, Melissa wasn't that brave. I found out from someone else, a mutual friend who couldn't stomach the guilt anymore. The day I learned the truth is burned into my memory. I remember standing in our bedroom, holding my phone, scrolling through screenshots of her messages with Eric. The world around me went silent. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. 7 years. 7 years of marriage, 2 kids, hundreds of date nights, thousands of kisses, and all it took was some guy at work to make her throw it away. I wish I could tell you I handled it with grace, but I didn't. I begged. I cried. I asked her why I wasn't enough. I replayed every moment of our marriage in my head, searching for the exact second when I lost her. She didn't even apologize. Not really. 2 months later, she left me for him. And that's when the humiliation began. Everyone knew. Our neighbors, our friends, even my coworkers. People I'd known for years, people whose kids went to school with mine, whispered behind my back, throwing me pitying glances at PTA meetings. I lost half my friend group overnight, because they chose her side, and honestly, I don't blame them. She was charming, She was beautiful. She knew how to make people like her. And me, I was just the boring husband who didn't see it coming. The divorce dragged on for nearly 2 years. It was messy, expensive, draining. I went from owning a house in the suburbs to renting a 2-bedroom apartment with mismatched furniture and paper-thin walls. Every time I came home from work, I was reminded of what I'd lost. And yet, through all of it, a small bitter part of me knew something she did. I knew Eric wasn't going to stay. I knew this wasn't going to last. Because guys like him, they don't marry the women they cheat with. They don't build lives with them. They use them, burn them out, and move on to the next. And Melissa thought she'd found a love story, but I knew better. I told myself I'd move on. I tried dating. I tried therapy. I tried pretending I was okay. But deep down, a part of me waited. I waited for the day she'd come crawling back. And when that day finally came, a year and a half later, I smiled to myself, knowing this was the beginning of something I never thought I'd want. Revenge. The first time Melissa called me after the divorce, it was a rainy night, in November. I still remember the sound of the rain hammering against my apartment window, the smell of microwaved leftovers sitting untouched on the table, and the dull hum of the TV in the background. I almost didn't answer. Her name lit up my phone like a ghost from another life. Melissa. For a second I thought it was a mistake. Maybe one of the boys needed something. But when I picked up, her voice wasn't frantic or urgent. It was soft, almost shaky. She said she just wanted to talk. I told myself not to care, not to listen, not to let her voice pull me back into the orbit I'd spent years trying to escape. But the truth, the sound of her crying on the other end of the line, still did something to me. I wanted to hate her. God, I wanted to. But old habits die hard, and some wounds never stop bleeding. That night, we talked for nearly an hour, about the boys, about work, about life. She told me she and Eric were done, that he wasn't who she thought he was, that things fell apart, that she made a mistake. I didn't say much. I kept my answers short, flat, detached, but deep down a dark part of me smiled. Because this was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. I wish I could say I hung up on her. I wish I could say I told her to go to hell. But instead, I let her voice linger, pulling me back into memories I thought I'd buried. Our first date in 2010, when we snuck into a midnight showing of Inception, because we were broke and couldn't afford tickets. The night Ethan was born, when we both cried holding him in the hospital room. The way she used to curl up against me on Sunday mornings, when the boys would pile into bed and we'd watch Toy Story for the 100th time. It's sick, isn't it? The way love and hate can coexist in the same breath. The next week, she called again, and then again. And slowly, we started seeing each other, at first just for coffee, then dinner, then late-night talks after the boys were asleep, and one night, without meaning to, we crossed the line. The first time we slept together again, it wasn't romantic, it wasn't tender, it was desperate, messy, angry. I wasn't doing it because I loved her. I was doing it because I wanted her to feel the confusion, the humiliation, the ache I'd felt for years. I started giving her mixed signals, telling her I needed time, telling her I still loved her, telling her maybe we could rebuild what we lost, while dating other women on the side. And she bought every word. She started texting me good morning every day, started dressing up when she came over, started trying harder with the boys, baking cookies with them, showing up at their soccer games, doing everything she could to be the version of herself she thought I wanted back. And God help me, I let her believe it. I let her believe there was hope, that maybe if she just tried hard enough, she could undo the damage. But every time I looked at her, every time I remembered the nights I was out traveling for work, while she was sneaking around with Eric, something inside me twisted. I couldn't see the woman I used to love anymore. I only saw betrayal wearing her face. It wasn't even about wanting her back. It was about control. And the sickest part, it worked. I watched her fall back into me, piece by piece, believing that time and forgiveness could fix us. But the truth, that train left the station the day she chose him over me. And no matter how many dinners we had, no matter how many nights we spent tangled in the same bed, I couldn't make myself feel the same way I used to. I started seeing other women casually, mostly through dating. Nothing serious, nothing meaningful, but there was one, Claire. Claire was different. She was divorced too, went through almost the same thing I did. She was kind, soft-spoken, and honest in a way that felt right. When we first met for drinks at this little rooftop bar in uptown Charlotte, She looked me straight in the eye and told me she wasn't ready for anything serious, that her ex-husband had wrecked her trust, and she was still healing. I respected that, I admired it, actually. And for the first time in years, I felt something real with someone who wasn't Melissa. But Claire had her own ghosts, her own baggage. Her ex wore her down with guilt about getting back together for the kids, and eventually, she went back to him, and that won her way more than I expected it to. I didn't realize it until she was gone, but Claire reminded me of who I used to be before Melissa broke me, and losing her, even if I never really had her, left me gutted. Meanwhile, Melissa thought we were working things out. She thought Claire was just some casual fling that meant nothing, and maybe that should have been true. Maybe I should have cared enough about doing the right thing to stop stringing her along. But I didn't, because somewhere deep down, I wanted her to feel what I felt. I wanted her to live in the same uncertainty she put me through. I told myself it wasn't revenge. Not exactly. I told myself I was just taking my time, just healing. But the truth, I wanted her trapped in limbo. I wanted her trying, begging, hoping, while I kept one foot out the door, and I got exactly what I wanted. But here's the thing about revenge. It doesn't fix you. It doesn't erase the memories. It doesn't make the sleepless nights go away, or the ache in your chest disappear. All it does is rot you from the inside out, one small victory at a time, because the more I played this game, the more confused everyone became. The boys started asking questions: why mommy was over so much, why daddy didn't sleep in the same bed, why we weren't together again. Family dinners turned awkward, holidays became tense, friends whispered, even my parents started looking at me differently, like they didn't recognize the son they raised. And yet, I kept going because every time Melissa looked at me with that soft, desperate hope in her eyes, a part of me wanted to shatter it. A part of me wanted her to finally feel the weight of what she'd done. But late at night, lying awake in the dark, the question that haunted me wasn't about her anymore, it was about me. Who the hell was I becoming?
It started small at first, like a drip of water slowly carving a canyon. The mixed signals, the casual lies, the little half-truths I told Melissa, they were like tiny sparks igniting chaos around me, and eventually I couldn't ignore the fire I'd set. The boys, Ethan and Liam, noticed the tension long before I did. 7-year-old Ethan asked one afternoon, sitting on the couch with a half-eaten slice of pizza, why mommy was always at our apartment, but we weren't together. His small brow furrowed in confusion, and Liam, only 5, mimicked his older brother, whispering, "Are you and mommy still a family?" I froze. Kids shouldn't have to be diplomats in the war between their parents. They shouldn't have to parse through adult confusion just to understand why their world isn't as simple as it used to be. And yet, there they were, looking at me for answers I didn't have, or worse, answers I wasn't willing to give. I tried to brush it off, saying something vague like, "We're still figuring things out, buddy," but the look on their faces told me everything. They were scared. They were confused. And slowly, over months, I started noticing little changes. Ethan becoming quieter at school, Liam suddenly clingy, nightmares that left them drenched in sweat, and subtle aggression when they argued with each other. I was breaking my own kids' hearts, one lie at a time, and the guilt, oh, the guilt was suffocating. It didn't stop there. Family gatherings became minefields. Melissa's parents, who had once adored me, started looking at me sideways, wondering why I wasn't fully embracing the reconciliation they imagined. My own parents were caught in the middle, calling me late at night, asking if I was happy, if I wanted to try again, if I could forgive her, and every time I gave them some vague answer about needing space or healing, I could see the disappointment in their eyes. Friends disappeared. Old pals from college stopped texting, stopped inviting me to hang out. I realized later that it wasn't just them choosing sides, it was my own behavior. The lying, the manipulation, the petty desire to make Melissa feel the same pain I had. It made people uncomfortable and they pulled away. Even my work suffered. I was traveling for a project in Atlanta in February 2022, sitting in a cramped rental car between meetings, and I realized I couldn't focus. Every text from Melissa pinged my phone, and I found myself answering, reading too deeply into every word, imagining scenarios, obsessing over whether she suspected what I was doing, whether she was falling too fast, whether she'd figure out that I wasn't in this to fix us. My productivity plummeted. I was tense, irritable, snapping at colleagues, apologizing in meetings, feeling like I was drowning in my own life. And then there was Claire. The memory of her kept sneaking back into my mind, stabbing me with bittersweet reminders of what honesty and genuine connection felt like. I kept replaying our last conversation, her soft, sad eyes telling me she needed to leave. I hadn't realized it then, but the pain of losing her, even casually, started to intertwine with the bitter satisfaction I felt in controlling Melissa. I remember one night in March 2022, sitting alone in my apartment, the boys asleep in their rooms, the TV on mute, scrolling through old photos of us, Melissa, me, the kids, birthdays, holidays, trips to the mountains. I stared at a picture of our first Christmas in that suburban house, the boys wearing matching pajamas, Melissa smiling with her cheeks flushed from laughter, and I felt a strange mix of longing and rage. I wanted to throw the picture across the room, scream at it, burn it, but a part of me just sat there, frozen, feeling empty. Melissa didn't make it easy either. She threw herself into this fantasy that we were rekindling something, that maybe all the hurt and betrayal could be brushed away with effort, patience, and love. And she was giving it everything, every ounce of herself, pouring her heart out, trying to win me back, trying to erase the past. But here's the cruel truth. I wasn't the same man anymore. I didn't feel the same love. I didn't want the same life. The perfect husband who would have crossed oceans for her, written sonnets at 2 a.m., and devoted his entire being to her. That man died the day I found out she'd betrayed me. I wasn't in love with her anymore. I cringed when I remembered the old me, bringing her flowers every week, planning surprise date nights, writing love poems, the humiliation of remembering all that effort, all that devotion, spent on someone who had slept with another man while I was at work, building a life for all of us, made me physically shiver, and yet, I kept her in the orbit of my life, sleeping with her, talking to her, pretending there was a chance, letting her imagine the possibility of rebuilding. I was torturing myself too. Every time I left for work, trips, I became paranoid. I imagined her sneaking around, meeting someone else, plotting against me, laughing at the old guy she used to love. My chest tightened every time I drove past a coffee shop we used to visit together. I started noticing things about her I never wanted to. Her subtle manipulations, the way she still tried to guilt me, the quiet pleas for affection she thought I couldn't see through. The truth is, I wasn't even sure what I wanted anymore. I knew I didn't love her the way I used to, but I also didn't want her gone. Not completely. Not yet. Part of me needed her to stay in my life, so I could have the power to hurt her, to control her, to make her feel just a fraction of what she made me feel. It was a poison, a slow one, eating me from the inside. And the worst part, the guilt. Guilt for the kids. Guilt for the friends who had chosen to stay in my life. Guilt for the way Melissa trusted me again, giving everything she had to a man who had already decided he couldn't forgive her. By summer 2022, I realized the fallout had spread beyond just my heart. My mental health was crumbling. I started waking up in the middle of the night, heart racing, drenched in sweat, haunted by flashes of the past. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't enjoy a meal, couldn't sit through a movie without my mind wandering to what Melissa was doing, thinking, feeling. Even the casual dating I tried didn't work. I couldn't get close to anyone, because the walls I'd built around my heart were now permanent. Every time I tried, I compared them to Melissa, compared them to what was lost, and inevitably felt empty and ashamed. The final straw came on a Tuesday in September. Melissa showed up at my apartment unannounced, bringing the boys, baking cookies for them, and trying to force a kind of domestic normalcy I couldn't buy into anymore. She was radiant, smiling, giving everything she had, and I just sat there, not watching her. I realized I couldn't even muster the emotion to fake it anymore. That night, after she left, I sat in the dark, staring at the ceiling, realizing something terrifying. I had become the very thing I hated. I was cruel, manipulative, vindictive, the exact opposite of the man I used to be, the man she once loved. I had lost her once, yes, but in my quest for revenge, I had lost myself too, and worse, I had lost the illusion that this could be repaired. There was no going back. I couldn't forgive her. I couldn't forget, and yet, I couldn't let go either. The fallout had begun, and I was trapped in it, tangled in my own bitterness, my own obsession, my own heartbreak. By the end of 2022, I realized something critical. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't let Melissa's presence in my life, her hope, her attempts to fix something that was broken, dictate my every thought, my every emotion. I was losing myself in this game of revenge, and the truth was, the satisfaction it gave me was temporary. It didn't heal the wound, it just made it fester. I started thinking differently. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore, emotionally, socially, or through her attempts to win me back. I began strategizing, not in some cold, calculating way like a villain in a movie, but in a real, grounded way. How could I navigate this chaos without losing myself or destroying everything around me? The first step was boundaries. I couldn't let her show up unannounced anymore. I couldn't let her blur the line between ex-wife and romantic interest. So I started saying no, quietly at first, then firmly. When she wanted to meet after work, I said I had plans. When she tried to text me about her feelings, I replied briefly, neutral. No more encouragement, no more mixed signals. It felt like a small victory at first, just taking back control over my own time and space. But the real shift came when I realized the power I had wasn't just about withholding affection or creating uncertainty. It was about reclaiming my life. I started focusing on me. Work became my anchor. I threw myself into projects, traveling for logistics conferences across the US and UK, building relationships with clients, refining my skills. I wasn't trying to impress anyone, not even her. I was trying to rebuild myself, the man I had lost, somewhere between betrayal and heartbreak. The other part of this was emotional honesty. I had spent so long justifying my feelings to myself, telling myself that Melissa deserved to be manipulated, that this was just revenge, that I could compartmentalize my pain, but I realized I had to face the truth. I had been lying to myself about my emotions, as much as I had been lying to her. I didn't love her anymore, not in that romantic, devoted way. I respected the history we had, but love, that had died, and admitting it, fully and painfully, was liberating. But admitting it wasn't the same as acting on it. For months, I stayed in this limbo, emotionally distant, physically present. I slept with her, spent time with the boys, answered her text, but never allowed myself to feel anything beyond the fleeting satisfaction of control. It was a tightrope, walking between humanity and vengeance, and some days I almost fell. Then came the moral reckoning. I realized I was hurting more than just Melissa. The boys were confused, friends were awkward around me, family members were caught in the crossfire, and while Melissa had made choices that destroyed our marriage, she hadn't done this to them. She was human, flawed, impulsive, desperate for love, and me, by keeping her in this limbo, I was becoming a reflection of her worst choices. That thought scared me more than anything. I wasn't a bad man at heart. I wasn't the cruel, petty husband she had made me feel like during her betrayal. I had to redirect this energy, this desire for revenge, towards something constructive, not for her, not for anyone else, but for me. So I started setting boundaries with the boys too. I explained, age appropriately, that mommy and I weren't together anymore, that we loved them equally, and that the adults' problems were not their responsibility. I started having honest conversations about respect, trust, and accountability. Little by little, I rebuilt a sense of normalcy in their lives. Melissa, of course, pushed back. She wanted to revive us, wanted the man she remembered, the man she thought she could have again. But I had already changed. I wasn't the same man who had given his heart blindly 7 years ago. I wasn't the man who would bend for anyone's forgiveness or affection anymore. It wasn't easy. Some days when she smiled or laughed, I felt that old pull, the echo of love that had once been ours. I caught myself remembering the good times, replaying them in my mind, like old home videos, but I forced myself to stay grounded. Good times didn't erase betrayal. Memories didn't undo years of heartbreak. By the end of March 2023, I was making real changes. I stopped sleeping with her. I limited my contact to co-parenting and logistical matters. I stopped giving her hope, even subtly, and I started opening myself up to the possibility of new connections. Carefully, cautiously. It wasn't about finding someone else immediately. It was about reclaiming the part of me that had been buried under betrayal and revenge, about learning to trust again, slowly, and understanding that love wasn't just about passion or history. It was about respect, honesty, and mutual growth. And yes, part of me still felt a pang of satisfaction. She couldn't force the past back. She couldn't undo the choices she made. But the more I focused on myself, the less important that satisfaction became. I realized revenge wasn't sweet. Not really. Healing was empowerment was. I started journaling. I wrote down every resentment, every fear, every memory that haunted me.
I wrote letters I never sent to Melissa, expressing everything I wanted to say, and in doing so, I started letting go, not of the past entirely, that stays with you, but of the grip it had on me. By summer, I even allowed myself to smile without guilt, to laugh at a movie with the boys, to enjoy a dinner with colleagues, to feel something other than anger or bitterness. Melissa noticed. Of course she did. She tried harder, as if intensity could bridge the gap between the past and the present, but I didn't let it. Not anymore. Not because I was cruel, but because I finally understood what I deserved: peace, clarity, and a life no longer dictated by someone else's mistake. Turning the tables wasn't about getting even anymore. It was about reclaiming my agency, my dignity, and my future. I couldn't change what happened, but I could control what happened next, and for the first time in years, that felt liberating.
By the fall of 2023, the fog that had clouded my life for years finally began to lift. It wasn't sudden and it wasn't dramatic. There was no lightning bolt of clarity or cinematic aha moment. It was quiet, subtle, a shift that started in the small, ordinary things. I had stopped sleeping with Melissa. I had limited contact to co-parenting and logistical matters. I had started investing in myself, my health, my career, my friendships that had survived the storm. I traveled more for work, yes, but I traveled lighter, freer. There was still the occasional pang of memory, the echoes of betrayal, but I could confront them now without letting them dominate my life. The real breakthrough came one evening in late October when I sat down to have a serious conversation with Melissa, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in honesty. I told her exactly what I had been feeling for months, that the love we had once shared wasn't there anymore, that the trust we had was irreparably broken, and that I couldn't go back to being the man she remembered. I told her that I respected her as the mother of our children, that I cared about her well-being, but that romantic reconciliation wasn't possible. I remember her face, a mix of hurt, disbelief, and grief, and for a moment I felt the old pull, the remnants of affection that had once been ours, but I stayed firm. I wasn't cruel, but I was honest. And for the first time in years, I didn't waver. She flipped out, of course. I expected it. The shouting, the tears, the pleas. I sat there and let her release what she needed to release. And when it was over, something strange happened. The storm passed, not magically, not entirely, but enough for both of us to take a breath. The next weeks were awkward, tense, and sometimes painful, but they were also necessary. Boundaries were set, schedules adjusted, and slowly the boys began to understand that their parents weren't together anymore, not in the messy, confusing way they had been, but in a stable, structured, predictable way. Co-parenting became our focus. Ethan and Liam needed consistency, not confusion. They needed to know that despite the pain, their parents could still function as a unit when it came to them. And as I watched Melissa interact with the boys, teaching them to ride bikes, helping with homework, laughing at their jokes, I realized that love comes in many forms. Romantic love isn't the only kind that matters. I also started dating again, carefully this time, not to get revenge, not to prove anything to Melissa, but because I finally allowed myself to feel human again. Small steps, coffee dates, walks in the park, conversations that lasted longer than texts. I wasn't searching for perfection. I was searching for honesty, companionship, and mutual respect, something I had longed for but didn't have with Melissa. And I realized something crucial. I wasn't just healing from her betrayal. I was healing from my own obsession with control and revenge. I had spent years letting bitterness dictate my every move, and in the process I had almost lost myself entirely. Taking her back, even in the twisted, manipulative way I had taught me the depth of my pain and ultimately the value of reclaiming my own life. I started journaling again, reflecting on the years we shared, the mistakes she made, the mistakes I made, and what I wanted from the future. I wrote letters to her that I would never send, documenting my grief, my anger, my small victories over resentment, and my hope for a life that wasn't tethered to someone else's choices. By winter, I had rebuilt a sense of peace, not perfect peace, not happily ever after peace, but peace enough to breathe without thinking about manipulation or revenge. The boys were thriving, my friendships were stabilizing, my work was fulfilling, and I finally started to see the world through a lens that wasn't clouded by bitterness. Melissa too began to find her own footing. I won't pretend she was okay immediately, but I could see her starting to rebuild herself without me. She was learning to navigate life as the mother of two children who still loved her, but as an individual who couldn't rely on old patterns of love and hope. And the strange irony of it all, by letting go, by stopping the game, stopping the revenge, stopping the emotional manipulation, I gained everything I had been chasing through bitterness, control, power, satisfaction. They were fleeting, but peace, self-respect, clarity, those were last. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about the man I used to be, the one who would bring flowers on random Tuesdays, write love poems, and give his all to a woman who didn't deserve it. And sometimes I feel a twinge of sadness, but mostly I feel gratitude for the lessons learned, the resilience built, and the man I became after all the pain. I know there will always be scars. Memories of betrayal don't disappear. The humiliation, the heartbreak, the nights spent staring at the ceiling wondering what went wrong, they are part of me now, but they don't define me anymore. I am more than the pain Melissa caused, more than the mistakes I made, more than the chaos of those years. And the boys, they are my anchor, my motivation, my reminder that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when it's messy, even when it's hard, even when the past tries to pull you under. So here I am, years removed from the betrayal, from the heartbreak, from the twisted dance of revenge. I have learned that love is not something to reclaim from someone else. It is something to build within yourself. That happiness isn't taken or given, it is earned, one honest decision at a time. Melissa will always be part of my story, the beautiful, flawed, complicated chapter that shaped the man I am today, but she will not define my ending. And for the first time in years, that feels like a victory that doesn't come from hurting someone else, but from finding my own freedom, my own peace, my own life.